Lesson 7.1, Inverse Variation. There's two types of variation we'll be looking at. One we've already looked at is direct variation, y equals ax. And it's called direct variation because when x changes, y changes the same way. So if x increases, y increases. Inverse variation is the equation y equals a divided by x, and it goes the opposite way. When x gets bigger, y gets smaller. And when x gets smaller, y gets bigger. So the x and the y go in opposite directions. In both cases, a is the constant of variation, meaning within the same problem, a is the same and doesn't change. So what type of variation do we see here? X, y equals 48. Well, both of the equations we had y equals ax and y equals a over x. Both of those were solved for y. So let's solve this one for y. Divide both sides by x, and you get y equals 48 over x. Well, that one looks like this one here, which was inverse. Let's try another. 2i equals x. So let's divide by 2 to solve for y. So you have y equals x over 2. But remember that's the same thing as 1/2 x. So that's actually like this one here, where a is 1/2. So this one is direct variation. About this one? Well, we've got this plus 3. Which means it is not a variation. The variations, notice both of the little formulas up here at the top, neither of them are adding, it's simply multiplying or dividing. So why don't you try page 359, number 1, y equals 2 over x. Is that inverse or direct? That's right, it is inverse because it follows that formula. So what if we have a bunch of data, which means a list of numbers? What type of variation do they show? So we're going to look at the y values. If the y increases as x increases, that would be direct variation. But if y decreases as x increases, it would be inverse variation. Probably. But we need to make sure that the a is truly constant. So we'd plug each of the data points into one of the variation equations and find a. If a stays the same, the data has that type of variation. For example, here's a small table. What type of variation? Well, as you can see, as x gets bigger, y gets smaller. So we're going to try inverse. So inverse is y equals a over x. So if I do that, I have 8 equals a over 2 for the first point. Multiply by 2, so a is 16. The second point, the y is 4, the x is 4. Multiply to solve for a, you get 16. Last one, y is 2, x is 8, multiply. Look at that, 16 is the same. So a always stays the same, therefore a is constant, and yes, that makes it as truly inverse. Why don't you try number 9 on page 359. Pause while you do work. All right. Well, as x increases, y also increases, so it appears to be direct. So you try y equals ax, you plug in the x and the y, and your a always is the same thing. So yes, it is direct. All right, we have some variation problems, so to solve those, we're going to write the equation in order as stated. The word varies means equals a, so if you go along and see varies, you put equals a right there. And you plug in your x and your y or what other variables they gave you, and you find a. So then you can plug in a and solve your problem. For example, 359, number 15. Y varies inversely as x. So we have this y varies inversely as x. That would be y equals a over x. That's the inverse, dividing by the x. So now we can plug in the 8 for the y and the negative 3 for the x and solve for a. So a appears to be negative 24. And now we're going to write our equation. So it's y equals a over x. So there's our equation. And now we need to find y when x is 3. So plug in a 3 for the x, and you should get negative 8. Why don't you try number 13? Pause the video while you work on it. The answer should be y equals negative 20 over x. And when you plug in the 3, you get y equals negative 20 over 3. Let's try an example. The time t in hours that it takes a group of roofers to roof a house varies inversely with the number n of roofers. It takes a group of 4 roofers 9 hours to roof the house. All right, so let's start with our first sentence. It says the time it takes to roof a house varies inversely the number n. So t varies inversely, so we're dividing a over n. Then we fill in what we know. N is the number of roofers, and the t is the time. So it's 9 hours and 4 roofers. Multiply both sides by 4. You'll get 4 times 9 or 36 for the a. So now we have our formula as t equals 36 over n. So now we can answer our question. How long does it take 6 roofers to finish the house? So we're going to put in a 6 for the n. So 36 divided by 6 is 6 hours.